Welcome to the JCT Science Second Subject Day. The theme for this day is Deepening the Learning. The recording of this series of screencasts was made necessary by the current situation, whereby the restrictions in place to counter the pandemic of COVID-19 has made it impossible for us to bring this workshop to teachers in its original format of a live workshop. We have made all possible efforts to adapt our workshop in such a way that although it was originally designed for live interactions in groups, teachers can benefit from engaging remotely with its content. This video is broken into 4 sessions, which can be viewed separately. However, for continuity and in keeping with the day from last year, it is recommended that you watch them in sequence. They are Session 1, Exploring Skill Development, Session 2, Planning, Session 3, Moving Students Forward, and Session 4, Exploring Concept Development. The video will play from start to finish for each session, and it can be stopped at any stage, rewound or rewatched. There are specific moments where we will recommend that you pause, engage with the learning experience, and then restart by pressing play. When this is the case, you will be directed to do so, and you will see the pause and play icons on the slide. This resource can be engaged with by individual teachers. However, some activities will be made richer by collaborating with colleagues, as happened during the workshop. With this in mind, we have endeavoured to bring you the teacher voice from the many cluster venues we visited throughout the country last year. In order to do this, throughout the presentation, you will see a Blackboard slide which will give you a flavour of some of the conversations that occurred and the feedback from teachers. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping points to note. Please open the booklet that accompanies this video. It can be found adjacent to this video you are viewing on the JCT website. It can be viewed online or it can be downloaded and printed off. If you need some scribble space, I would recommend you keep a small notepad and pen by your desk. So let's begin Session 3, Moving Students Forward. Our learning intentions for the 4 sessions when taken together are to deepen our understanding of the process of developing our students as scientists and to appreciate the value of collaborative practice in our department. Consider how your students grow and develop skills as they move from first through second and through third year. During the cluster day, we looked at how those students might develop research skills over time. We're going to hear in a moment from a student about their experience during first year as they developed these research skills. And we will also hear about what was happening early on in second year.
We were studying about human health and lifestyle choices in science. We had a discussion in class about exercise. We had done a few research projects in first year, and from this I learned that we are not allowed to plagiarize other people's work. This means that I know that I need to put things in my own words. I know this because these are part of the success criteria we built with my teacher, and I have them written down in my research notes. I also know that I have to list my sources, so that I'm definitely not copying. I'm using the bookmark our teachers gave us in first year to help me evaluate my sources.
So to recap on what we heard from that student, we're joining this class of students at the beginning of second year. They had engaged with some research in first year and had learned how to summarise the main points of an article in their own words. They had also done a little on evaluating sources, and while reading through these various sources had had some class discussions about how research reports might be structured. So, in September of second year, they carried out research on how human health is affected by lifestyle choices. During the cluster day, teachers looked at a piece of work from a student in this class. Unfortunately, we do not have permission to share the piece of work with teachers online. We only have permission to use the work during our cluster days. We want to share the rich learning that took place in the rooms with you now. To do this, I will begin by describing the piece of work. The piece of work explored the benefits of exercise. It was written in paragraphs and laid out with subheadings. A conclusion was drawn by the students, and it was acknowledged that the research was one-sided. References were given, and they included blogs, the Daily Mail, a textbook, and the Department of Health. Some comments on reliability of references were given. Teachers were asked to identify the strengths in the piece of work. Here is a flavour of what they said about it. It was well written, it had a good layout, there was a great use of subheadings, references were given, and these references were evaluated. Pause for a moment and consider what you might look for in a piece of work. Where can we go for guidance on what a piece of research should include? Well, we have this poster, which is based on the features of quality for a good investigation. During the cluster day, teachers explored the right-hand side of this poster, where we can see the features of a good science in society type investigation. Teachers looked at the same piece of work again, but this time with a certain focus. The teacher's focus was determined by one aspect from each of the investigating, communicating, and knowledge and understanding sections. Here is a flavour of what was suggested by teachers during the cluster day. Teachers felt that the piece of work could be improved by fully evaluating the sources, perhaps using all parts of the CARDS acronym. Other teachers felt that more balanced references would be useful, and they also recommended that the questions asked by the students should have two sides. Lastly, teachers felt that the students' opinions and conclusions should be backed up with data from the reference piece. As well as giving students feedback, teachers suggested that interventions, providing classroom experiences and exemplars would also help to support students' research. As you can see, there is a huge amount of feedback here. There is a lot to improve. Teachers recognised that hearing all of this at once could be overwhelming for a student. Teachers felt it was useful to give targeted feedback that was specific and actionable by the students. Here's what one researcher had to say about supporting students. A natural inclination is to want to fix everything you see. That's the teacher's eye view, where the target is perfect achievement of all learning goals. Try to see things from the student's eye view. As we moved forward during the cluster day, we considered the student's eye view and why it is important to do this. Let's consider the impact that feedback can have on students. For some, they may not know where to go next. Others might see the goal as being too difficult to achieve, an uphill climb, and may give up. They may need baby steps. Others may be totally frustrated and not open to advice and support, while other students may need to clarify with questions, and it might be just what some students need to have a light bulb moment around what they need to do to improve. Some students will support one another in moving forward, and you will have the students who will run ahead with feedback and might not pause to take the time to reflect on what they actually need to do. All different students, some of whom might find receiving support challenging for many different reasons. This teacher, having looked through all the students' work and comparing the work from different students to see where they might have struggled or had questions, the teacher identified that most students had difficulty referencing and evaluating sources. So she decided to plan some classroom experiences where the students would have an opportunity to evaluate sources. The teacher and her students co-constructed success criteria, which you can see here. They included to consider sources from different points of view, evaluate for credibility, date, author, sources, where the information is coming from if it is adapted, present the main points in your own words and reference, giving full names of books, websites, source, and when justifying your opinion, back up your argument with evidence from your findings. Later in the year, there was lots on the news about the possibility of mandatory vaccination programs for children, and the students were coming into class asking the teacher all about it and whether vaccinations should be mandatory or not. So she decided to ask students to research whether vaccinations should be mandatory, and they were reminded to review their success criteria for evaluating and referencing prior to carrying out their research. So at this point in the cluster day, teachers looked at the work that one of the students handed in. This was a different student's work, but from the same class. Teachers read the work and considered the success criteria and discussed how to move this student forward. Unfortunately, we do not have permission to share the piece of work with teachers online. This piece of work explored whether vaccines should be mandatory. The student listed the reference, followed by a comment on its reliability, and underneath that they gave a summary of what they found out in their own words. The student gave references for and against mandatory vaccines. These included references from vaccines.gov, the NHS, and healthway.wa.gov.au, which is an Australian Department of Health. The student gave a 3-sentence conclusion stating their preference for mandatory vaccines. Here is a flavour of what the teachers in the rooms felt would move this student's work forward. The students should use the success criteria carefully, while not forgetting earlier skills they had acquired. They should include what they learned and did well in earlier tasks, and continue to include those good features of research investigations. They should fully evaluate the reliability of their references using the CARDS acronym. Is there anything else you would suggest? What kind of suggestions have you made to help students move their work forward? Take a moment and pause to make some notes. What makes assessment formative is that the student has opportunities to reshape the performance to better achieve that goal. In a system of formative assessment, the key is to gear feedback to the long-term goals. As indicated here in this quote from Grant Wiggins, feedback and feed-forward are part of formative assessment, and the teacher always has the long-term goals in mind. Note, reshape here does not mean redraft. The teacher didn't get the students to rewrite their exercise, but rather the students got the opportunity to apply new learning the next time they engaged with research. Grant Wiggins reminds us that feedback is information about how we are doing in our efforts to reach a goal. But what are our goals? Our goal is to develop students as scientists. How do we know how we are doing in achieving this goal? We often think of feedback as something that is given to students to move them on in the moment. But what about the feedback we get from students? These arrows here show that we may have taken a deviated path from our initial plan based on the feedback we get or have gotten from our students. Take a moment to consider these questions. How has your plan worked? Was it informed by feedback? What did your students' experience in the CBA tell you? Have your students' experiences informed your plan? Our journey will be different depending on the students in front of us each year. Feel free to jot down some of your ideas and answers to these questions. Thank you for engaging with this session. It would be useful to chat to some of your colleagues back in school who had attended the cluster day and to build on your learning. You might like now to proceed to session 4, Exploring Concept Development.